Welcome back, friends. So we just want to talk about this part of our homework assignment this week, which is drawing your name over a mass conception form. There's a few things that I want to say about it that aren't captured in our concept hitter that talks about mass conception. Make sure you go see that because it introduces a couple of key points. Well, first it talks about what are mass conception forms: sphere, cube, tetrahedron, cone, cylinder, donut, spool, which are really important to know because the idea here is that we relate, we take complex forms and relate them back to simpler forms. If I can draw the simple form and draw it very well, then it's much easier to draw the complex form. So this is associated with, of course, drawing from imagination, but then also when people talk about drawing from general to specific. These mass conception forms are some of the most general kinds of forms that we can think about, and then it's just about, can I create the illusion of the general and then add on to it? So, here, we've got our cube, but this isn't all that much more complex, but we can easily see this tea container, relating to the cylinder. So if I first draw that very basic cylinder shape, right, then it makes it much easier to just add on the detail there. General to specific. The other thing that we're thinking a lot about is creating that illusion, that illusion on the picture plane. So we're looking for the most descriptive kind of line to use to give us the form that we're after. Right now, when we've got it all the way down to a cube, then we want to see those sides of the cube, recognize that those are flat shapes. And also when we're thinking about mass conception, as opposed to when we're using like a blind contour approach, which is really all about the flat shape, with mass conception, we can think through the form. All right. So it's obvious when you think about it, but it's important to keep reminding yourself that when you draw, we're always using flat shapes. So here we're going to cut out these flat shapes and put them together to get the illusion. It is those flat shapes that create the illusion. We're always working on that flat picture plane, which is both an imaginary plane between the viewer and the subject, and also just the surface of the drawing paper. So we brought those shapes together, and we got the illusion of a cube in space. And this is true for cubes, but it's also true for all of our mass conception forms. And it's true for anything that you draw. You can't draw the wonder and enchantment in a child's eyes. You can only draw the shapes of light and shade. And it's up to the viewer to read into those abstract shapes the life and the mind of the child depicted. The fun thing about mass conception is that we can think of them as a kind of virtual three-dimensional volume. So, when you're drawing them, you can think your way around and through the forms. Sometimes this means seeing the forms as transparent, as in drawing the back edges, and sometimes this means, for example, if I'm drawing that child, that I might push my lines around to the back side of the form, perhaps taking a cross contour and driving it around the head, which helps us to feel the volume of the subject. So here we have a transparent block, seeing through the block on the right with the red, and then seeing it as a solid form on the left. So to take this one step further, when we're using mass conception, we can use it and its logic to reveal axis and attitude, axis and angle of the form. So here we have the cube, and then we can imagine a central axis being driven right through the center of that cube, and then that rotation around the cube, that's what we're describing when we're talking about axis. How much rotation is there in the cube?
Next, we think about angle. So what's the angle of that long axis? And it's good to remember that here we're drawing those basic shapes. And we can see that axis and attitude very clearly. However, it becomes very useful to think in terms of basic shape when we're drawing very complex things like a figure. So we can use a mass conception form, a basic shape, as a way of quickly revealing and describing the axis and attitude of arms and legs, for example, or the curve and bend of a torso. We're drawing these mass conception forms out of our imagination, and we want to think about drawing from imagination as a drawing system. If we see it as a drawing system, then we can understand it to have a limited number of functional rules. One of those is the way that we associate three-dimensional space with drawing that kind of virtual space. The counterpoint to this is the way that drawing from life emphasizes the flat shape and the flat picture. But when we're using mass conception, we want to think about that dimensionality in terms of height lines, width lines, and depth lines. We can start to think around the subject, draw construction lines and construction points both inside and outside the form. We can think of the form as transparent. We can think of the form as solid or as a cross-section.